Setting a 1,500-pound utility pole in the ground with a block and tackle is not an easy job. Neither is raising several hundred pounds of transformer 40 or 50 feet into the air, or lowering an injured crew member to the ground without jeopardizing your own safety or that of the victims. However, these and other tasks, typically performed by line crews, can be accomplished safely and efficiently if you understand rigging and rigging equipment. Rigging is the term used to describe the process of moving both heavy and light loads using ropes, blocks, and other special equipment. The term can also be used to indicate the specific way equipment is set up to do a job. In overhead line work, every job presents special rigging problems for the line crew. In some cases, specialized vehicles such as bucket trucks can be used to make the job of rigging easier. In other cases, conditions may require that all or part of the rigging be done by hand. Whatever the situation, safe overhead rigging requires a combination of experience and the thorough knowledge of rigging techniques and equipment. Now, the purpose of this program is to teach you some of the fundamentals of overhead rigging so that you can acquire the necessary experience to do your job safely and efficiently. And we'll start by reviewing 3 basic elements common to all rigging operations. Then we'll go on to look at ropes, knots and knot tying, hand lines and blocks and tackle. Finally, we'll apply the material we've covered to some common rigging situations. Now, since we're concentrating on rigging fundamentals in this program, we'll only make minimal use of specialized vehicles. Later on in your training, you'll have an opportunity to apply these fundamentals to rigging with bucket trucks, derrick, and equipment. Now, one thing you need to realize about rigging is that there are many different ways that a job can be accomplished safely. Different companies may have different policies and procedures that govern rigging tasks. You and your instructor may find it necessary to adapt some of the material we'll cover to meet the specific requirements of your company. Regardless of a company's policies and procedures, however, there are 3 elements of safe rigging that always apply. These are planning the job, inspecting the equipment, and using the equipment properly. Let's take a look at what each element involves. Now, the most important part of any rigging task is planning. The job must be planned so that it gets done, but more importantly, it must be planned so that it is done safely. Now, the first aspect of planning that we'll consider is the weight of the load. If you don't know how much weight has to be moved, you won't know what equipment you need to move it. Attached to line equipment, such as this transformer, there's a nameplate that provides information about the weight of the individual component. Here, for example, the nameplate indicates that this particular transformer weighs 350 pounds. Obviously, you'll need to choose rigging equipment that has the capacity to lift 350 pounds safely. Lifting such things as wire conductor and utility poles makes planning a job a bit more difficult. The overall weight of wire conductor is influenced by a number of variables, such as the amount of tension on the conductor, its position on the pole, and the span between the poles. Now, poles come in uniform lengths, but the type of wood and the circumference of a pole make exact weight calculations difficult. And here's where experience counts. Many companies have charts, such as this pole chart, that give approximate weights for various types and sizes of poles. While these charts are reasonably accurate, an experienced line crew will plan on using rigging equipment that has a higher capacity than the charts indicate they need. A basic rule of thumb for any rigging situation, when you're not absolutely sure of the load you have to move, is to over-rig, just to be safe. Now, once you've established the weight of the load, you need to determine the balance of the load. On many components, the manufacturer usually provides lifting points in the component's design. On this transformer, for example, here's one of 2 lifting points provided by the manufacturer. The other one is directly opposite on the other side. When properly used, the lifting points make it possible to lift or lower the transformer with relative ease. Finding the balance of a utility pole, on the other hand, requires a good deal of experience. Utility poles are tapered, making them heavier at the base than at the top. Each rigging situation will have different balance requirements, and these are best learned on the job under the guidance of an experienced lineman. Our third consideration when planning a job is clearance and safety requirements. You need to be aware of obstructions such as tree limbs, houses, power lines, anything that the load you're lifting or lowering might get hung up on. You also need to determine the safety requirements for both you and your crew, as well as passers-by. Now for you, this means following procedures for rubbering up lines, wearing gloves and sleeves, and selecting the proper equipment you need to actually do the job. Working on a pole like this one that has different voltage levels and circuits on it will have different safety requirements than a pole like this. Now for passers-by, you need to follow your company procedures and local traffic ordinances for the placement of such things as cones, warning flags, and barricades, so that the public is protected from all hazards. The final planning consideration we'll look at is selecting the proper equipment to do the job. If you're lifting heavy components, this involves choosing the types of blocks and sizes of ropes that have the capacity of handling the load. We'll spend more time looking at choosing equipment later in the program. Right now, let's go on to consider the next element of safe rigging, inspecting the equipment. Once equipment has been chosen, it needs to be carefully inspected. Here, a lineman is inspecting a block on a hand line, looking for signs of damage or wear. Another crew member inspects the rope used on the hand line for frays, cuts, abrasions, or other indications of potential hazards. Now, we'll also look at equipment inspection in more detail later on. Now, the final element of safe rigging that we'll consider is using your equipment properly. Now, this means that you use the equipment for the time to do, and also means that you do not overtax the capacity of the equipment. Pride your company, and it means knowing where it's safe to be while a job's being done. Hand signals, knot preferences, and the way rope is made up and stored may differ from crew to crew. Knowing these things in advance increases the efficiency of your operation and keeps everyone on the crew happy. Now, in this part of the program, we defined rigging as the process of moving heavy and light loads with rope, blocks, and other special equipment. And we indicated that although all rigging situations are different, there are three elements of safe rigging that always apply. These are planning the job, inspecting the equipment, and using the equipment properly. We'll begin looking at different aspects of these elements in more detail in the next part of this program when we discuss rope.